Hi, I'm Liam Mucklow, and I'm the Director of Education for Foresight Sports. And I'd like to welcome you to being part of the Foresight community. I'd also like to thank you for being a part of our Level 1 online education and training program. Over the course of this program, we're going to cover all of the basic aspects that you need in order to become an expert in using the technology that you've invested in. Our learning objectives for this program are to understand the basic principles of stereoscopic vision, to understand how to properly apply the fiducials to the golf club. We want to make sure that we understand the basic data parameters as presented for ball flight and for club delivery. And of course, we're also going to go through and make sure that you're well versed in the software operation as well as some basic troubleshooting should you find that you have any issues with connectivity, hardware, or software. Let's get to work. So one of the first things that I want to talk to everybody about is how did I actually end up here creating this education program for Foresight Sports? So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story and let you know a little bit about my background as well. When I purchased my first Foresight Sports product, it was actually the 34th launch monitor. Now, I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to technology. I've always just loved this stuff. But I was in my old training facility, and I was actually working with a former Masters champion. Now, this player at the time was struggling with their driver, and I had them indoors hitting golf balls on one of my radar measurement systems. And he kept telling me that the ball flight information we were getting looked different than what he was seeing outdoors. So we went down to, at the time, what was my simulator bay, and I had him hit some shots on the GC2 with HMT. And after the very first shot, he looked at the screen and he said, "That's what's happening." And it was really neat for me because I got to see this little red dot on the club face that showed me where he struck the ball, and I could see what the lie angle was on his driver. And that was a major learning moment for me. So not long after that, I found myself in San Diego, and I wanted to stop in at Foresight Sports and just learn a little bit about them. So when I got there, I sat down with Rick Cuellar, their director of sales, and the first question that I asked Rick was, Rick, who's Foresight Sports? And what I learned, I found incredibly interesting. The technology group actually comes from original equipment manufacturers. They have over 20 years experience designing the most accurate measurement systems for companies like Callaway and TaylorMade. The other half of the company comes from Full Swing Golf. So they have this great wealth of experience in the golf recreation and simulation market. And we put those two halves together, that's how we get Foresight Sports. Now, their first consumer product was the GC2. This guy right here. Now, this was released in 2010, and you can see here, it has these two cameras that are used to measure the golf ball as it passes through the launch window. Of course, we also had the onboard display on here, which is nice, so you don't need any other peripheral devices. Now, very quickly, the accuracy of this machine, particularly in the indoor environment, made it the choice of retail stores across the continent. In 2012, Foresight came out with this attachment called the HMT, or Head Measuring Technology. Now, this has another set of stereoscopic cameras, which of course sat in front of the GC2 and allowed us for the first time ever to actually measure the club face with an affordable product. Now this is when the coaches really started to take notice. It was the first time we'd ever got that little red mark of impact point, which of course we're going to talk a lot about later, on any type of launch monitor. Now this also gave us some really unique things like delivered lie angle, and it also gives us closure rate. We're going to go through all of those in depth. Now, at last year's PGA show, Foresight Sports introduced the GCQuad. So we have two sets of stereoscopic cameras integrated into the single unit. So it makes it much easier to switch from right to left-handed. We've got extended battery life, so for coaches and fitters, we can operate all day outside without the need for power. We've got an enhanced onboard display screen, and there's a couple other neat little features in here like a built-in altimeter and barometer, which is going to give us data on the onboard display, which is even more accurate to your exact location on planet Earth. I can tell you that the booth at the PGA show last year was absolutely mobbed shoulder to shoulder. And this year, with unveiling the new putting application feature, it's sure to be the same again. So now that we know a little bit about the company and their products, let's go ahead and start to learn about how stereoscopic technology actually works. So let's start to ease our way into this online program by talking a little bit about what our learning objectives are. Now, obviously, we need you to become competent with the basic operations and setup, but a couple of our key learning objectives are to define a universal language. We want to make sure that every Foresight user around the world has the same level of understanding and the same definition for each data parameter measured by the technology. Of course, we also want you to have a basic understanding of what is stereoscopic vision and how does it work. As we get deeper into the course, we're actually going to go through each individual club delivery parameter and talk not just about how it's measured, but what part of the club is it measured from and at what moment in time is it measured at. From there, we're going to move into each piece of golf ball data that is measured by Foresight Sports and talk about how that fits into the golf ball model to give us very accurate extrapolation of full flight data. Now let's get started. Before we do a deep dive into all of the parameters that are measured by your Foresight technology, I think it's important that you actually understand a little bit about how it works. When we understand the backbone of technology, we can do a better job of applying the feedback that it gives us. So we take a look at our GCQuad. Obviously, we see 4 cameras in here, quadrascopic vision. But let's talk about what is stereoscopic vision. Well, in its simplest form, stereoscopic vision is the process of tracking one object with 2 cameras that allows us to perceive things in 3D space. It's tracking that one object from those 2 different points that actually allows us to accurately measure things like ball speed, club speed, launch angles, and even spin rates. In fact, the resolution in these cameras is so high that the software can use a process called spherical correlation, where it actually sees the dimples on the golf ball to measure the rotation as that ball passes through the launch window. So now that we at least have a basic understanding of what stereoscopic vision is, let's review how it works specifically to this product and talk at a high level about some of the things it lets us measure. So again, if we look at our quad, you can see we've got 4 cameras in here. Now, these 2 cameras sitting on the target side are actually going to track the golf club on approach. So these cameras lock on to the photoluminescent stickers or fiducials, and we're going to talk more about them later, and that's where all of our club data comes from. Now, these other 2 cameras you can see that are angled out towards the ball flight area are actually going to lock on to this golf ball as soon as it separates from the golf club. Each camera is going to take dozens of photographs as that ball passes through the launch window. And you'll be able to see how the high-resolution, high-speed cameras can actually track each individual dimple that give us phenomenally accurate data in any environment. Now, back to our learning objectives. Remember, the biggest one was to define a universal language and get our entire global community on the same page. We would like you all to be able to share and compare data. And one of the most important things for that to be able to happen is that we all use the same standardized procedure for applying the fiducials. So I'm now going to walk you through how we recommend you put them on. Now, the first thing is where we actually have to remove the fiducial from our dispenser pack. So a couple clicks forward, and I now have that fiducial attached and ready to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grooves up, and I'm going to place that dot between the 6th groove. Now, I like to use my other finger to hold the dot down, and then I go ahead and I remove the little attachment piece. So we can see right here, entered in between the grooves, and I'm ready to put the rest of them on. I'm going to go through the same procedure. I'm going to match up the groove lines over here, and you can see when I place this one on that I have it so it is set just inside the edge of the grooves. Now, these two are probably your most important fiducials to get placed on properly. It's going to be from this center point that a lot of our measurements are taken, like club head speed, and actually these two are also going to be integral for defining the delivered lie angle of the golf club. To get full club data, we do need to place two more on. One is going to go here at the bottom toe, and this one's pretty easy. It's just going to be between the bottom two grooves, and our last one is going to go all the way back up the top between these top two grooves. So now, with these fiducials placed on in this manner, I'm going to be able to get full club data. But let me talk to you a little bit about why we have them placed in the spots they are. First off, the way the software is designed, this is what's going to give us an accurate scaling representation when we look at the impact point screen. Now, the second thing that we need to understand is how this affects the resolution of the cameras. Now, this is a 7-iron here. You can see that it's very easy for the cameras to identify each one of those 4 dots independently. But as we increase the loft to where a lob wedge would be, you can imagine that if we had these down much lower, these two would blur together, and the system would not be able to fully triangulate a face plane. So this also gives us the maximum utility for accurate measurements across all types of iron head. Now let's take a look at what we need to do for the driver. When we get started with driver again, we're going to want to start with the center 2. So I'm going to go over here, and just inside where the grooves start, I'm going to place the first dot so the groove is running right through the middle of that dot. Now, I'm going to get my second one for the toe, and when I do this, I'm going to place it the same way over here. Now, if you happen to be using a driver that doesn't have grooves that mark out this vertical center, you're going to have to find it yourself, but these are going to be important because they set the zero line. They set the zero line for the vertical center and the horizontal center. So we do want to make sure they have equal spacing from either side of the geometric center of the club face, also from the top and bottom of the club face. When it comes to applying the final two, again, we just want to keep them a couple grooves apart, and I like to actually have them trace the geometry, the shape of the toe of the club. Now that we have the fiducials properly applied to the driver, we can go ahead and get full club data on every swing. Now, as we move forward, it's going to be important that you familiarize yourself with this application process, because again, we want to make sure that we do it the same way every time. That's going to ensure maximum consistency of the data we get day in and day out, not just for ourselves, but for all of our players.